So the ATF has issued a proposed rule which will result in more gun control. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think that the federal government needs to stop infringing on our Second Amendment rights, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. I also want to give a shout out to one of the main sponsors of the channel, that is USCCA. Through your membership, you get training, education, and self-defense liability protection. So if you carry a firearm, I highly recommend you look into USCCA. That's who I recommend, and I'll put a link to them down in the details section. So last week, the ATF came out with a proposed rule to redefine some things, which will ultimately lead to more gun control. We talked about this proposed rule previously with an ATF leaked document. A lot of things didn't change from the leaked document to this actual proposed rule, but I want to cover real quick generally what this proposed rule does for those of you who aren't aware or didn't watch that prior video. So the title of this proposed rule is Definition of Frame or Receiver and Identification of Firearms. So that is the working title. Now, what does this proposed rule do? Well, it changes the definition of what a frame or receiver is. It provides new definitions for things like complete weapons, complete mufflers and silencers, privately made firearms, which is going to be important. It redefines what readily is for the purpose of these laws. It provides deadlines for markings of firearms by manufacturers, as well as expands the record-keeping requirements that are currently in existence. So as you can see, this proposed rule does a lot in expanding gun control in the US, and this is actions by the ATF in trying to change some of the definitions and some of the language that's currently in existence to lead to more gun control. So the general goal of this proposed rule is to expand the definition of what a firearm is, bring more things in that definition, and then subject these items, devices, all of these things to the regulations that currently firearms are as well. So how does it do that? Well, first it redefines what a frame or receiver is. This is coming directly from the proposed rule. The department proposes amending ATF's regulations to clarify the definition of firearm and provide a more comprehensive definition of frame or receiver that more accurately reflects firearm configurations not explicitly captured under the existing definition. So again, expanding that definition, expanding and changing the definition of frame or receiver so that more things fall under the definition generally of what a firearm is, and therefore those things can be regulated like firearms are with background checks, serialization, all of those things. So here is the new definition of frame or receiver. Under the proposed rule, a frame or receiver is any externally visible housing or holding structure for one or more fire control components. A fire control component is one necessary for the firearm to initiate, complete, or continue the firing sequence, including but not limited to any of the following: a hammer, bolt, bolt carrier, breech block, cylinder, trigger mechanism, firing pin, striker, or slide rails. So what does that all mean? Well, they are expanding the definition of frame or receiver to include more things. If anything holds any of these mechanisms, a hammer, bolt, bolt carrier, breech lock, cylinder, trigger mechanism, firing pin, striker, slide rails, if any actually externally visible item or holding mechanism has any of those things in it, any of these components in it, it is considered to be a frame or receiver, subject to serialization, subject to being treated as a firearm. So that means the upper of a AR receiver, which holds the bolt carrier, is considered to be a frame or receiver, subject to being treated as a firearm and subject to serialization, background check, things like that. So what is the general impact of expanding this definition that we talked about? Well, I've already kind of hinted at it. It's treating these items as firearms, and it says as much in the proposed rule. It says, while a frame or receiver is clearly within the statutory definition of what constitutes a firearm under the GCA, the Gun Control Act, clarifying that this term includes how most modern day firearms operate would help ensure that the regulatory definition of frame or receiver will not be misinterpreted by the courts, the firearms industry, or the public at large to mean that most firearms in circulation have no part identifiable as a frame or receiver. So as you can see, not good. It's never good when you have the ATF or any federal government expanding the definition of what something is so that they can further regulate it. Now, beyond just expanding the definition of what a frame or receiver is, they also go in explicitly expand and change the actual definition of what a firearm is. Here, you have language that says, under the GCA and implementing regulations, the term firearm includes any weapon, including a starter gun, which will or is designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive. So that is what they're saying the definition of a firearm is going to be. Although weapon parts kits in their unassembled, incomplete, and or unfinished state, or configuration generally will not expel a projectile by the action of an explosion at the time of sale or distribution, weapon parts kits that are designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosion are firearms under the GCA. So again, expanding the actual definition of what a firearm is to something that is an incomplete lower receiver or upper that is not yet able to actually expel a projectile, they are saying that that is still a firearm under this proposed rule. They go on to state that in recent years, individuals have been purchasing firearms parts kits with incomplete frames or receivers, commonly called 80% receivers, either directly from manufacturers of the kits or retailers without background checks or record keeping. Some of these parts kits contain all the components necessary to complete a functional weapon within a short period of time. Some of them include jigs, templates, instructions, drill bits, and tools that allow the purchaser to complete the weapon to a functional state with minimal effort, expertise, or equipment. Weapons parts kits such as these are firearms under the GCA because they are designed to or may be readily converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosion. And then you have them go in and tweak the definition of readily for the purposes of determining when something is readily convertible to something that can expel a projectile. The new definition is a process that is fairly or reasonably efficient, quick, and easy, but not necessarily the most efficient, speedy, or easy process. So they are saying something that can be done easily and can be readily and fairly easy to do, but it doesn't have to be the easiest way or the fastest way. So it's kind of a little bit of a doublespeak there. Now in this proposed rule, they also add in a list of factors in making this determination. It includes things like time, how long it takes to finish the process, ease, how difficult it is to do so, expertise, what knowledge and skill is required, equipment, what tools are required, availability, whether additional parts are required and how easily they can be obtained, expense, how much it costs, scope, the extent to which the subject of the process must be changed to finish it, and lastly, feasibility, whether the process would damage or destroy the subject of the process or cause it to malfunction. So there are a list of factors, but it's not an all-inclusive list of factors when determining whether something is readily convertible. They go on to state that defining the term readily is necessary to provide further clarity in determining when incomplete weapons or configurations of parts become a firearm regulated under the GCA and NFA. So again, it's all about expanding the definition of what a firearm is and bringing more things and more potentially readily convertible things into the definition of a firearm, subjecting them to more regulation, serialization, background checks, all of those things, more gun control. This proposed rule also adds in a definition of privately made firearms, which will include things like 80% lowers as well as 3D printed items as well. This new definition of privately made firearms will mean a firearm including a frame or receiver assembled or otherwise produced by a person other than a licensed manufacturer and without a serial number or other identifying markings placed by a licensed manufacturer at the time the firearm was produced. So they're talking about you making firearms, either 3D printed, 80% lowers, maybe even milling out some like aluminum, things like that to make frames or receivers. This proposed rule will require FFLs to mark and serialize these privately manufactured firearms. So for example, privately made firearms acquired by an FFL after the rule would need to be marked within 7 days or before selling, whichever is sooner. So one of those two. For those privately manufactured firearms that are acquired before by the FFL, they will be required to be marked within 60 days or before selling, whichever is sooner. And the same thing goes for 3D printed items as well. They will need to be marked and serialized. And finally, what this proposed rule does as well is it changes the requirement of retention of records from the current status of 20 years to potentially indefinite or as long as the business is open. Now, what's even more important is that this is a proposed rule. It is going to hit the federal register and then a commenting period will open. And when the commenting period opens, I will leave a link for you guys to click on it and actually leave a comment on that. And I want to talk about some general guidelines on what you should do in leaving a comment on this proposed rule. So first, when you guys leave your comment, you have to include the document number that you are actually commenting on. Specifically, this document is the ATF 2021 R-05. So you have to have the document number in the comment that you are leaving. Also, you have to include your full name and address in the comment for your comment to actually be taken into account. Also, do not include curse words into your comment. I know we all get very frustrated with all these things that they're doing, all this proposed gun control, but if you leave curse words in your comment, they will be filtered out and your comment will be kicked because it's just one of the things that they do. You want to personalize your comment to yourself, include information about yourself, your experience with firearms, and just generally the issue you take with this proposed rule. You can use my videos as a guidepost for some of the things and the negative things that this bill would do and how you oppose that. I highly recommend, if you have other friends or people around you that support the Second Amendment, share this video, share other videos, educate them about this proposed rule and the negative implications it will have on our 2A rights in the US. Also, real quick before I end this video, I definitely want to thank everybody that came out to the Armed in May event this weekend. As you can tell, I'm super sunburned. My voice is still kind of gone. I really appreciated everybody that came out to the event, all the vendors, everybody. I definitely want to thank Reno May for also doing the event with me. It was really awesome to finally get to meet him in person, talk with him, hang out. We had a lot of fun. It was an exhausting 3 days, but it was really cool getting to meet a lot of you guys out there. And also, if I did meet any of you guys out there, any of you guys watching this, if I took pictures with you, talk with you, go ahead and comment down below. It'd be interesting to try to put some names and faces to the commenters here and the viewers here. But again, I had an amazing time. Definitely thank you to Route 66 for hosting the event. They pretty much did everything and it was just a really amazing time. And it sounds like we're gonna be making it an annual thing. So for those of you who didn't get an opportunity to come out this time, you will definitely have an opportunity going forward. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I'll try to answer the best of my ability. Also, if you guys like this video and you like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, subscribe, and make sure to hit that notification bell because that helps the channel analytics, helps us spread the word about the Second Amendment, also spread the word about 2A news like this that is going on in the US that affects our Second Amendment rights. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and never forget this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.